time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The order did not arrive with a public ceremony, a televised declaration, or the sound of palace trumpets. It arrived inside a sealed royal folder, placed directly before Prince William. One signature later, the future king enforced the authority of the 1917 letters patent and removed Prince Harry's remaining HRH privileges. Across the Atlantic, Harry received the news in silence. What had once been a family fracture had suddenly become a constitutional separation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William stood alone beside the long table, his eyes fixed on his brother's name. The 1917 letters patent, a royal order originally used to define who could hold princely rank and the style of his or her royal highness, had become the foundation of his most painful decision. HRH was not merely a decorative title. It carried ceremonial standing, diplomatic recognition, and a direct link to the sovereign institution. Removing it meant Harry would no longer be treated inside royal structures as someone acting with the authority or approval of the crown. The prince lifted the pen, then stopped. For one brief moment, duty collided with memory. He was not looking at the name of a distant royal rebel. He was looking at the younger brother he had once protected, the boy who had shared grief, pressure, and the crushing weight of royal expectation. Yet the future king also understood why the moment mattered. Harry had stepped away from official service, but the remaining HRH connection still allowed a shadow of royal status to follow him into private life. William believed that shadow had become impossible to defend. Harry read the formal notification twice in California. Meghan watched his face change before asking what had happened. The Duke did not answer. He placed the paper face down, moved away from the table, and stared into the distance as anger hardened into humiliation. His brother had not merely restricted the public use of a title. He had ordered palace departments, ceremonial offices, diplomatic representatives, and royal staff to remove the style from every future internal and official reference. The Duchess reached for the document, but he kept one hand resting over it. Harry understood the deeper message immediately. The institution was no longer treating his separation as temporary, emotional, or open to repair. It had become permanent policy. William had drawn a line between royal blood and royal privilege, and his younger brother now stood outside it. Then another detail surfaced. A handwritten notation beside the recommendation confirmed that King Charles had reviewed the file hours before the signature was added. The monarch had read the arguments. He had seen the consequences. He had not intervened. That silence struck harder than the order itself. Before Harry could call his father, Princess Anne received a private briefing through a documented palace memorandum. She read the final paragraph, closed the folder, and quietly admitted that the decision had been prepared long before that morning. But to understand why William was prepared to sign such a final order, the story must move beyond the legal language and into the private wounds carried by the three men at the center of the monarchy's deepest family rupture. Before they became opposing figures in a royal crisis, William and Harry were two boys walking behind the same coffin, bound by grief and protected by the belief that neither would ever abandon the other. Yet years of accusation, distance, and public betrayal changed that bond. Now King Charles faced the outcome every father fears. One son guarding the crown, the other believing the crown had deliberately erased him. William carried the future of the monarchy like a weight no one else could fully understand. As heir to the throne, he believed his first duty was to protect an institution that could not survive through private exceptions and emotional bargains. The crown, meaning the sovereign and the system of duties built around that role, depended on clear boundaries. To the prince, every privilege Harry retained blurred the line between serving the monarchy and using its status from outside. Harry saw something very different. HRH, the shortened form of His Royal Highness, was not merely a formal way of addressing him. It represented his birth, his military service, his connection to his mother, and the years when he had stood beside William as an equal member of the family. The Duke believed removing it was not administrative discipline. It was an attempt to rewrite who he had been. Charles sat alone with the legal briefing open before him. The document explained the recommendation, the risks of leaving the matter unresolved, and the authority William wanted enforced. When the king reached the final paragraph, he removed his glasses and placed them carefully beside the folder. He said nothing. His hand remained over the cover, as though holding it shut could delay the moment when fatherhood gave way to monarchy. Meghan watched Harry move through the room with his hands clenched. The Duchess urged him not to answer in anger, warning that one reckless statement could deepen the damage. He refused to accept silence. The Duke insisted that saying nothing would allow William's version of the conflict to become the permanent record, leaving him defined by a decision he had never been allowed to challenge. William's anger ran deeper than constitutional concern. A private briefing recorded by his senior secretary revealed that the future king felt personally betrayed by Harry's repeated use of royal proximity while condemning the family that gave that proximity meaning. The prince believed his brother wanted the emotional power of the monarchy without accepting its discipline, restrictions, or responsibility. Charles had tried to preserve one narrow compromise. The monarch proposed leaving the dormant style untouched as long as Harry never invoked it publicly or used it to imply royal authority. William rejected the idea. He argued that a privilege did not become harmless simply because it remained unused. Its existence still carried influence, expectation, and the possibility of future confusion. Then one ceremony destroyed the fragile arrangement. Harry attended under carefully agreed conditions, but a private exchange inside a royal corridor changed everything. William left that encounter convinced the HRH question could no longer remain suspended. That ceremony became the point of no return, because one bitter conversation transformed years of resentment into the decision the prince would eventually place before the king. The final rupture did not begin inside a courtroom or during a televised interview. It began at a private remembrance ceremony, where the brothers were expected to honor the past without reopening it. For several minutes, William and Harry stood beneath the same roof, separated by only a few steps. Then one quiet conversation near a closed chapel door shattered the last compromise between them and gave the future king the trigger he needed. Charles had allowed Harry to attend as a private family member, not as a working royal. The remembrance ceremony, a formal gathering held to honor a deceased member of the family, was meant to offer reconciliation without restoring status. The king believed the distinction mattered. A son could be welcomed into mourning without being returned to public duty, and Harry's presence was supposed to prove that family ties had not been completely destroyed. William accepted the arrangement only after firm conditions were agreed. The prince wanted no request for private briefings, no claim to official precedence, and no attempt to turn the occasion into a public sign of royal return. Ceremonial precedence meant the formal order in which royals were seated, introduced, or placed at official events. To him, those rules protected clarity. To Harry, they increasingly felt like calculated humiliation. The ceremony ended quietly. Then the Duke caught up with his brother in the narrow corridor beside the chapel and asked why his seat had been moved away from the senior family grouping. He spoke in a low voice, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. Harry insisted he remained the king's son and should not be arranged like a distant guest inside his own family. William stopped walking. The future king answered that blood did not create unlimited entitlement, especially after years of public attacks on the institution. He told Harry that being Charles's son could preserve a personal relationship, but it could not guarantee ceremonial standing. The Duke stepped closer and accused his brother of disguising revenge as constitutional discipline. Harry's next words changed everything. He declared that no seating plan, courtier, or private order could erase the HRH status granted to him at birth. His Royal Highness was the formal style linking a prince directly to the crown, and the Duke spoke of it as something beyond William's reach. The prince heard more than wounded pride. He heard proof that his brother still regarded royal rank as power he could invoke whenever exclusion became painful. Neither man noticed the senior palace official behind the adjoining door. The courtier heard the full exchange and recorded it that evening in a confidential memorandum, a private written account intended only for the sovereign and senior advisors. Charles received the document before midnight. The king read Harry's words twice and understood that his compromise had failed. William watched his brother walk away without looking back. Then the prince turned to his private secretary and spoke with chilling calm. "Prepare the legal position in full." Weeks later, when the file was complete, William sent no warning and offered no new bargain. He summoned Harry for the confrontation both brothers had spent years avoiding. There were no cameras, no aides seated between them, and no father present to soften the language. William and Harry faced each other across a private room whose closed doors carried the weight of decades. On the table rested the completed royal order. The future king had not called his brother to negotiate. He had called him to explain why the monarchy was about to withdraw the final privilege Harry believed could never be touched. William had chosen a secluded royal residence because he wanted no interruption and no escape into performance. Phones were removed before the meeting, staff waited beyond the door, and Charles remained absent by design. The prince wanted the conversation stripped of ceremony. HRH, the formal style meaning His Royal Highness, linked a royal directly to the sovereign and carried public meaning far beyond polite address. In his view, that style could not remain attached to someone who no longer represented the crown, accepted royal direction, or carried the duties expected of an active royal. Harry looked at the folder but refused to open it. The Duke asked whether William had brought him there to explain the law or to enjoy the humiliation. He accused his brother of using the authority of a future reign before he had inherited the throne. Then he demanded a direct answer. Was this constitutional necessity, or was it punishment dressed in legal language? William's control finally broke. The future king pushed his chair backward and told Harry that private pain could not be exposed again and again while royal privilege remained protected. He said his brother could not reject responsibility, condemn the institution, and still expect that same institution to preserve its highest recognition. The prince had spent years defending the possibility of reconciliation. Now he believed that possibility had been used against him. Harry leaned forward, anger sharpening every word. The Duke said William was not defending the monarchy. He was reshaping it around personal wounds. He warned that removing HRH would not silence him. It would prove every accusation he had made about a family willing to sacrifice one of its own whenever the crown felt threatened. Then William delivered the detail Harry had not expected. Charles had already reviewed the legal basis and authorized the discussion. The king had read the recommendation and would not block its implementation. Their father's approval did not appear as a public declaration, but as a documented notation attached to the confidential briefing. Harry's expression changed. Rage remained, but disbelief broke through it. The Duke finally opened the folder. He read only the first page before closing it again. Harry slid the order back across the table without reading the final section, rose from his chair, and walked toward the door. William did not follow. The prince remained seated because the last page no longer required argument. Beneath the cover, the signature was already complete. The brothers' confrontation carried the emotion, but the decision still depended on a wider network of royal authority. One figure held the power to stop William, or allow the order to become final. William carried the pen, but Charles carried the burden. As sovereign and father, he stood at the point where constitutional order collided with paternal instinct. One intervention could have delayed the measure, softened its language, or preserved a narrow exception for Harry. Instead, the king entered his private study, closed the door behind him, and made a choice more painful than any public proclamation. He allowed the order to proceed. Charles read the legal foundation slowly. Palace advisors had tied the decision to the 1917 letters patent, a royal instrument used to define who may hold princely styles and how those styles are recognized by the crown. In plain terms, it gave the monarchy a framework for controlling royal identity when old arrangements no longer matched present duties. The king understood why clarity mattered. If Harry no longer served the sovereign, royal recognition could not continue to imply active authority. William's influence had already grown beyond ceremony. The prince now carried greater responsibility for long-term royal planning, and senior advisors increasingly treated his judgments as the shape of the future monarchy. Charles remained the sovereign, but the future king was already building the system he expected to inherit. That made the decision larger than one family argument. It became a test of whether the crown would protect personal exceptions or enforce one standard for everyone. The king glanced toward a childhood photograph of William and Harry near his desk. He studied the two boys for several seconds, then turned the frame face down. The monarch could not reconcile those children with the men now divided by law, resentment, and public accusation. He reopened the file because memory offered no solution. Camilla entered quietly and watched his hand remain over the page. The queen asked whether he could live with Harry, believing his father had chosen the crown over him. Charles did not answer at once. Then the king said the choice had begun years earlier, when private pain became public ammunition, and every family wound was turned into a weapon against the institution. Harry made one final request for a direct conversation before implementation. The Duke asked for minutes, not mercy, but Charles declined. The monarch sent a brief written response through his private secretary, stating that the matter now concerned the structure of the monarchy, not an unresolved dispute between father and son. Anne supported the decision in a documented private briefing. Princess Anne warned Charles that an unused privilege could still mislead foreign officials, charities, and commercial organizations into believing Harry carried crown approval. The Princess Royal, meaning the special title traditionally given to the sovereign's eldest daughter, argued that silence around status created influence without accountability. By evening, the decision had escaped the privacy of the study. Sealed instructions left the royal office for ceremonial planners, communications staff, security coordinators, and diplomatic representatives. Once those orders moved beyond Charles's desk, the wound stopped being private. Harry's public identity was about to change in ways no one could hide. The first consequences were almost invisible. A heading changed, a protocol note rewritten, a name removed from an internal list. But each alteration carried the same message. Harry was no longer to be recognized through the style that had followed him since birth. In California, he watched the monarchy erase that connection line by line. In London, William watched the order take effect without permitting himself the relief of victory. Harry's name changed first inside royal directories and future ceremonial plans. Diplomatic guidance, internal correspondence, and authorized palace references were all revised. A royal directory was simply the official record showing how members of the family should be named and addressed, but its influence reached far beyond paperwork. Governments, charities, event organizers, and palace staff relied on those records to understand who represented the crown and who did not. The Duke remained a prince by birth and kept his dukedom within the new arrangement, yet the practical loss was severe. He could no longer claim the precedence, formal address, or implied royal authority connected to His Royal Highness. Precedence meant the official order in which members of the family were seated, introduced, or recognized at major events. Without it, Harry was no longer placed within the working structure he had once taken for granted. A staff member showed him the updated program for an upcoming royal occasion. Harry stared at the line where his name appeared without the familiar style. He read it once, then again, as though the missing letters might return if he waited. Finally, the Duke spoke in a low voice. "They wanted me to notice." Meghan found him alone later that evening, rereading the palace communication. The Duchess told him the decision could not erase his life, his service, or the person he had become. Harry answered that identity was difficult to defend when his own family controlled the official record. He did not raise his voice. That made the humiliation feel deeper. Then the consequences moved beyond ceremony. Advisors warned that governments and major institutions might now treat Harry differently during private international appearances. Without formal royal recognition, officials could question whether his presence carried any connection to the sovereign. The loss of 3 letters had begun to affect access, influence, and security expectations. William rejected every attempt to soften the order. A proposal suggested restoring HRH recognition temporarily for funerals or major family gatherings, but the prince refused. He argued that royal status could not become a costume worn only when emotionally or publicly convenient. The future king wanted one rule, without exceptions. Harry did not release the furious statement his team had prepared. Instead, the Duke requested one final private meeting with Charles. He no longer wanted the style returned. He wanted his father to explain why he had allowed William to remove it. That meeting would change the meaning of the crisis, because father and son were finally about to face each other without lawyers, secretaries, or the crown standing between them. Harry entered expecting a king and found an exhausted father. There were no constitutional folders on the table, and no advisors waiting behind the door. Charles had dismissed everyone. For several moments, neither man spoke. The title dispute had brought them together, but both understood that the conversation was about far more than 3 royal letters. It was about abandonment, loyalty, and whether love could survive after trust had been stripped away in public. Harry had asked for one thing: a direct explanation. The Duke did not want another written notice, legal interpretation, or carefully managed message passed through staff. Charles agreed only if they met alone. No minutes were taken, meaning there would be no official written record of what was said, and no formal agenda existed to guide the exchange. For the first time, father and son faced the emotional cost without the language of duty protecting either man. The silence broke when Harry asked the question he had carried across the Atlantic. He wanted to know whether Charles had approved the decision because he truly believed it was right, or because he lacked the strength to oppose William. The Duke kept his voice controlled, but his hands trembled. He was not asking about procedure. He was asking whether his father had abandoned him willingly. Charles did not hide behind the crown. The king admitted he could have delayed the order. He could have requested new wording, preserved a temporary exception, or forced William to wait. But every delay kept the crisis alive and pushed an unresolved family conflict toward the future reign. The monarch confessed that he had already failed by allowing the division to grow until one son was forced to inherit the consequences of the other. Harry absorbed the answer without moving. Then Charles separated love from status in the clearest terms he had ever used. He told his son that losing HRH did not remove him from the family, but it ended the belief that affection must guarantee institutional privilege. His Royal Highness was a formal link to the sovereign's authority, not proof of a father's love. The king insisted that the two could no longer be treated as the same thing. The Duke's anger began to collapse into grief. Instead of arguing, Harry asked whether his mother would have accepted what had happened. Charles lowered his eyes before answering. Diana, he said, would have fought fiercely for both sons, but she would also have demanded that they stop using her memory as a weapon against each other. Harry left without offering forgiveness. The Duke still felt betrayed, and Charles knew the meeting had repaired nothing. Yet the son rejected the immediate counterattack his advisors had prepared. He chose silence. By the next morning, that silence had become part of a global spectacle, and one image outside Buckingham Palace would capture Harry's fall more powerfully than any royal statement. At sunrise, the royal fracture moved from palace rooms to front pages across the world. Broadcasters called it the most decisive separation of a senior prince from crown privilege in a generation. Supporters praised William's discipline. Critics condemned an act of humiliation. Yet the defining public moment came outside Buckingham Palace, where two groups gathered beneath the same gates, one holding signs for the monarchy, the other carrying photographs of the brothers as children. William became the center of every debate before breakfast. British broadcasters described the order as the clearest sign yet of how the future king intended to rule. Fewer uncertain roles, harder boundaries, and no royal privilege without active duty. The crown meant not only the monarch, but the entire system of authority, service, and public responsibility surrounding the sovereign. That distinction mattered because Harry's removal was being presented as a model for the monarchy's future, not simply punishment for one man. The royal household released a brief confirmation through its official communications office. The statement said that styles and privileges must reflect current service to the sovereign. It avoided accusation, but the language left no room for appeal. William read the final version in silence. The prince had achieved the clarity he wanted, yet the message now belonged to the world. Television screens filled his office with breaking banners and childhood photographs. William watched one presenter place images of the brothers as boys beside the announcement of Harry's loss. The future king's expression tightened. He asked for every screen to be turned off, proving that public approval had not removed the personal cost. Harry faced the same story from California. The Duke opened a news broadcast and heard a presenter describe him as a prince by blood, but no longer a royal highness by recognition. He closed the laptop before the segment ended. The phrase reduced years of grief, military service, and family conflict to one brutal line. One newspaper captured the crisis with even greater force. Its front page showed William signing the order on one side and Harry leaving a royal residence on the other. Across the center ran the headline, "The Final Three Letters." By midday, that phrase had spread across radio, television, and social media. Outside Buckingham Palace, the argument became human. One woman approached the railings and placed a photograph of young William and Harry beneath the gates. Beside it, she left a handwritten card. The crown survived, but the brothers did not. Cameras recorded the moment, and the image became the emotional symbol of the day. Harry remained silent for hours. The Duke rejected an aggressive televised response prepared by advisors and chose a restrained written statement instead. When he finally spoke, he did not ask for the privilege back. He chose the words that would decide whether the crisis ended in retaliation or acceptance. Harry's final statement contained no threat, no demand, and no attempt to reclaim the letters removed from his name. He acknowledged the decision, affirmed his birth connection to the family, and declared that his future would no longer depend on royal recognition. William read the statement privately. Charles read it twice. No reconciliation followed, but neither did another attack. The crisis ended with an irreversible truth. The monarchy had preserved its boundaries, while the family accepted that some wounds could not be repaired by titles. Harry confirmed through a carefully written public statement that he would respect the removal of his HRH privileges and would not challenge the order. The Duke declared that service, identity, and purpose could no longer depend on royal styling. HRH, meaning His Royal Highness, had once connected him formally to the sovereign's authority. Now he accepted that his future would have to stand without that support. William achieved the constitutional clarity he had demanded. The prince had drawn a firm line between those who actively served the crown and those who lived beyond its duties. The crown meant the monarchy as an institution, including its authority, obligations, and public role. Birth still carried meaning, but duty had become the price of official privilege. The victory brought no joy. William sat alone, folded Harry's statement, and placed it inside the same file as the signed order. The future king had secured the structure he believed the monarchy needed, yet his face showed no triumph. To protect the institution, he had surrendered the last hope that brotherhood might survive unchanged. Charles returned the childhood photograph of his sons to its upright position. The king did not reverse the order, excuse his silence, or pretend the damage could be repaired. He accepted his responsibility. Protecting the monarchy had demanded a choice, and the monarch understood that he would live permanently with its cost. Harry emerged diminished in formal standing, but released from the expectation that he might one day return to his former royal position. The Duke still carried his bloodline, childhood, military record, and personal history. Yet he now faced a harder truth. He had to build legitimacy without borrowing authority from the institution he had rejected. William emerged stronger as the guardian of the future crown, but strength came with isolation. The prince had established that inherited rank could not remain untouched when service ended. The enforcement of the 1917 letters patent, a royal document used to regulate princely styles and status, became the defining sign of a monarchy that valued clear duty over inherited uncertainty. Charles remained father to both men, but love could no longer hide the consequences of their public choices. The doors of royal privilege closed behind Harry, and no one reached forward to reopen them. The monarchy survived. William's authority was established. Harry's HRH status was settled completely. Beneath that constitutional victory remained the final human truth. The crown preserved its order by accepting the loss of a brother, a son, and the family unity those three letters once represented. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.